Another attempt to wear Ukraine down before the sun even came up this morning. The results of Russian drones and missiles raining down on Kyiv, and the second attack on the Ukrainian capital this week, hitting ordinary apartment blocks like this one. At least 2 dead and dozens injured. Putin also knows if he can make a population tired, if he can make them weary, he stands a better chance. This is all part of his war strategy. 7 died earlier this week in a country where people choose between sleep and safety. And by day, starting from scratch all over again.
This is pure terrorism. How else can you describe this? When you and your children don't sleep the whole night, and practically every night is like this.
The attacks are targeting the civilian population in order to make Kyiv and the government sign the agreement faster. They just hit the civilians so that we accept the agreement.
That agreement is the 28-point peace plan discussed by the US and Russia, seen by many as a Russian wish list. The Ukrainian president confirming today that a delegation is on its way to the United States, with meetings due to take place tomorrow. Zelenskyy has already had crucial talks with his chief of defense intelligence about what the negotiables and non-negotiables will be. Kirilo Budanov is one of the key players in Ukraine's new negotiating team, which was put together after Zelenskyy lost his right-hand man and powerful chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, in a whirling corruption scandal that's shaken Ukrainian trust and the very presidency itself. But there is something that feels very familiar in all this, heavily reliant on US intelligence and its Patriot missile system to protect itself from Russia. No. It could lend itself to a cycle of diplomatic pushes against Ukraine we've seen before.
You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people.
And after the Oval Office bust-up, the US briefly withdrew intelligence, during which time at least 20 people were killed by Russian strikes. This week, Trump called Zelenskyy ungrateful once more. But this is where Ukraine can be more independent. This is a sea drone, and this is what it does. Ukraine's intelligence service saying it hit 2 tankers from Russia's shadow fleet in the Black Sea, vessels used to export its oil while skirting Western sanctions. Ukraine's military saying it has also hit an oil refinery in the south of Russia, as well as a military aviation plant. And some say the US should be cautious about outright claims that Ukraine is losing.
The situation on the front line is hard, but definitely it's not as critical as Russia seems to portray it. So actually Russia is very actively spreading disinformation and trying to convince Ukrainian partners and the United States, first of all, that Ukraine is losing and Ukraine needs to negotiate right now, but the reality is very different.
600,000 Ukrainians were left without power this weekend. Russia's defense ministry said Moscow had launched the overnight strike in response to what it called terrorist attacks. But Ukrainians know this is the true nature of the Russian regime. It's what keeps them up at night. And Putin knows that perfectly well.
Well, earlier I spoke to Alexander Marechko, an MP from President Zelensky's party, who is chair of the Ukrainian Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee. I asked him if the resignation of Mr. Zelensky's chief negotiator at the peace talks could affect the outcome Ukraine is hoping for.
Well, even though it was a very difficult decision for the president, because Mr. Yermak, his chief of staff, has been for a long time his very close associate, even his friend, but the president took a right decision, which was supported by our faction and by the parliament. And I believe that it's for the better, because it will enhance trust and confidence of people in Ukraine and also our partners abroad.
Because we know, don't we, that Vladimir Putin would seize on any weakness. And we also know that the US and Russia are talking about ending this war and that Ukraine sees that as ending the war on Russia's term? This is a moment of real jeopardy now, isn't it?
Well, we understand that Russians will exploit any weakness, any issue, and it's kind of even natural for them. We're not afraid of this. We will continue to fight, and we will never give up our, for example, territories.
Ukraine might not give up those territories or recognize them as Russian, but there were reports that President Trump is prepared to recognize Crimea and other occupied Ukrainian territories as Russian. What would that mean if that happened?
For us, it's a matter of principle. I believe that the United States will never do it, will never agree to this. But if it happens, it will be a huge blow, first of all, to the reputation of President Trump and the United States as a country. It would be extremely detrimental, damaging for the United States. That's why I hope it won't happen.
President Trump has withheld intelligence sharing before, and he's withheld weapons before. If that were to happen again, and this time they made it permanent, could Ukraine really survive in this war?
We will survive. The question is, since it's the war of attrition, what will be the price of our survival? It might be huge, unfortunately.
President Zelenskyy is meeting, we understand, President Macron of France on Monday. Do you think there's any prospect at all of Europe filling the void that might be left by the United States?
Of course, Europe will do their best, and economically speaking, it's a giant. But of course, we would like to have military-industrial capabilities more developed in Europe. And we gave Europe 3.5 years to get prepared for this.
Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk said talk of a recent US-Russia plan was about business. It was not about peace. How much do you think US business considerations are driving their negotiations to end this war?
Unfortunately, from my at least perspective, it's a serious problem because you cannot approach serious geopolitical, geostrategic issues from the perspective of a business-like frame of mind. It's not in terms of, cost and benefits analysis or economic approach. It's about national interest. It's about security. And it's also a very important issue about human lives. You cannot just put a tag on human lives of civilians who are being killed on a daily basis in Ukraine by Russian bombardments.
Alexander Mereshko, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.